We know what we don't want, but do we know what we do want? That's the theme of my little talk this morning. And before I get going on that, I want to just first of all say a big thank you to everybody who subscribes to the channel. Really appreciate that. Those who, of course, have donated, and a big thanks for that to keep the channel going, especially as I'm demonetized at the moment, as you know. And to everybody who emails in, and just to say, look, there's a lot of emails. I can't always get to every one of them. And if you don't hear back from me, I apologize. You know, there's only me, and what can you do? But I do appreciate the interest and everything that people give me with the channel. So thank you very much. Now, on to today's theme and topic. And as I say, we all know what we don't want. We're all pushing against all these different things. I mentioned the digital IDs yesterday, or the day before, whenever it was. I talk about the chemtrails and the spraying of the skies, the fluoridation of our water and other chemicals that are in there. We don't want any more lockdowns. We don't want our cattle being destroyed by a sudden foot and mouth outbreak or bird flu or whatever other nonsense that's been planned for us. And we know all these different things. We don't want the 5G towers radiating in our face. We don't want smartphones. We don't want to be snooped on. We don't want surveillance. We don't want all of these things. We don't want the councils acting fraudulently. We don't want the banks and all the others and the debt collectors and the government to act against our nature. We know that all of this is going on, including nanobots in the blood and things like that. We know all of this is going on, but we don't really want it. But my question is, we're focusing a lot of the time on pushing back and trying to alert people to the sort of the ills of the world, as it were. But do we actually know what we want to replace that? Do we have a vision? Now, I'm writing at the moment a book, and I'm hoping it'll be out and finished by around April time. There's a lot of work to go on it, and it may be a bit longer than that. And it is effectively the town that would not comply. You may remember me talking about Biggleswick. And in writing this book, I've had to actually think really hard, more than just what I put out as a simple allegory video in which a town turned its back on the council and said, well, we're not having that, and they all got together. And I realised that one of the things the people in that town, and the things that actually you and me need to do, is to think about what actually we want. What is it that we're going to replace? If we got rid of, I mean, it's all very well saying we're just going to get rid of all these things, but what do we want? How do we want to be governed, if we want to be governed at all? What kind of life do we want to lead? What's on the other side of pushing back? We know that, for example, fiat currency is just a promise to pay. It has no backing. It has no backbone. It means nothing. It's irrelevant. It's not even our money. We're buying stuff with something that's not even our money, with a promise to pay that the Bank of England are promising to pay, but they never do. You can't go in and say, well, I'll have this £10 note. Could I have £10 in silver, please? Because they won't entertain it. What do we want? What is it that we think that we can cope with? Can we go into a state of anarchy, for example? I interviewed a chap who said that during the time of the Berlin Wall, when that came down, there was a period for about a year when the government was no longer in existence and anarchy ruled. Not anarchy as in people going around smashing windows, robbing each other, burning houses, pillaging and all of that. Anarchy as in self-rule, the real meaning of the word anarchy. And he said it was the best of times because people were able to help one another. People realised they actually depended on one another. Communities sprung up in which, instead of the council or the government doing everything for them, they were on their own. They had to do things for themselves, and it was far more rewarding. And he said that eventually the government didn't like that. They got themselves back together again and then put in martial law, and things went downhill ever since. Is that something that we could cope with? I don't think that the public out there, you and I, probably cope all right. But the rest of the great unwashed, what do you think? Do you think they could cope? I mean, they barely are able to think for themselves, sadly, because of the brain draining and the mind control and all of that that's been happened to them, the whole teaching thing. How in the future, if we manage to push back all those things we don't want, what is it that we do? How are we going to bring up our children? Are we going to send them to be at school to be indoctrinated? Or do we have a different idea of what a school might look like? Or education, perhaps I should say, or showing kids knowledge and farming and money and all the things that seem to have disappeared, things that perhaps might be useful coming back. Can we bring those back? And how would we bring them back? And in my book, I've had to find an ingenious way to push back against the ever dictating council and try and illustrate how life might be able to push back. But what is it the town really wants from each other? And I don't think we spend enough time pushing a vision of the future that is positive, that is what we're aiming for. And for those that do believe in spiritualism and believe in manifestation or believe in creativity, if we're not thinking about the future we want, that we actually want, rather than the one we don't want, if we're not thinking about the future that has intrinsic meaning to us and is the type of life we want, how the hell are we ever going to bring that into fruition? We need, I think, more than ever to be thinking about the actual future that we want for ourselves and our children and our children's children, and push that message and show people what we want and demonstrate it and start to live the life that we want, rather than living in fear and shrinking back and saying, oh, I don't want this and I don't want that and I don't want the other. I'm just going to say no. Let's start saying yes to the life we actually want and bring that into reality.